In a few seconds, I'm going to ask you one simple question. Now, it's an important question, one that will affect my life for an entire year. And maybe, if you come along with me for this journey, it just might affect you as well. First, Happy New Year. It's a foggy and drizzly New Year's Day here in the Boston area. And all around our fair city, people are waking up, dealing with whatever residue they have from last night's celebrations or even last year's complications, which have been many. And many of them will select a New Year's resolution or two. Do you have a New Year's resolution in mind? Well, I do. And it's going to sound kind of funny, maybe even a bit counter-cultural to the moment. But before I tell you this New Year's resolution, I'm going to ask you that simple question that I promised at the outset. Okay, you ready? How much do you agree with this statement? I consider myself very masculine. Answer on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is disagree and 5 is agree. Now, I'm going to give you a moment to consider this statement and how much you agree with it. Ladies, this question is for you as well. Anybody can consider themselves very masculine. And as you decide where to place yourself on the scale from 1 to 5, let me tell you that I know the answer to this question. Maybe not for you personally, but I know the answer from a nationally representative survey that I conducted in March of 2021 of more than 1,500 men and women. Now, surveying, it's something I do, and I have done for more than 2 decades now. Some of the largest companies in the world have asked me to conduct surveys for them, to design, execute, and interpret the results, usually with millions of dollars riding on the outcome. So when I say I have surveyed more than 1,500 men and women in the U.S. and that my results are representative of the U.S. adult population, just understand that I know what I'm doing. So when I tell you what percent of people disagree with the statement, I consider myself very masculine, my results are likely close to the actual percentage of U.S. adults who disagree, give or take a modest margin of error. Okay, enough survey nerd stuff. Let's get to the results. We'll do some Blue's Clues here. So I'll ask the question again, and you can say your answer out loud. Ready? How much do you agree with this statement? I consider myself very masculine. On a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is disagree and 5 is agree. Go ahead and answer. Oh, okay, good. That's interesting. Now I can keep playing Blue's Clues and say, here's what I think I heard all of you say. But really, the results I'm about to share are from my national survey. Ready? Tired of waiting yet? Good, because here we go. Now, I apologize in advance. You probably didn't want to see charts. The only way we can do what I have resolved to do in 2022, however, is by being precise. I think I'm going to be diving into some tricky spaces, masculinity being a thorny topic for some people, potentially challenging. So to set proper expectations about what I'm doing and how I'm going to do it, I need to be the stats guy up front. My apologies. So what you're looking at now is a chart that lays out the scale from 1 to 5 from left to right, where agree or 5 is on the right. The source details of the survey are at the bottom. Now you can see that for all men and women combined, there it is, the answers are pretty flat. I mean, starting all the way to the right, about a fifth of people in the survey agree strongly, with the numbers getting smaller in the middle and a jump up at the left, with a third of people disagreeing or answering 1, what I would refer to as strongly disagree. Does it mean that masculinity is a fringe concept and that many people, nearly half or 47%, if we combine the 2 disagree statements, disavow it? Because as I think we've all been told maybe a few dozen, a few hundred, a few thousand times, masculinity is bad. It's toxic after all. And if you think that's true, you should look at this figure with some vindication. Only 21% of people are so bad as to strongly agree that they consider themselves very masculine. Or you could anticipate, and my snappy title does hint at this, that these numbers are as flat as they are because I've combined men and women. And, as is the case with many measures that I'll talk about in this project of mine, men and women very regularly see things differently. And the value of identifying as masculine is one of those things. So let's see how women answer. So women comprise a bit over half of the final sample, or 814 respondents. If we just put their responses up, things sharpen dramatically. 2/3 of women strongly disagree that they see themselves as very masculine. Now, this doesn't mean they don't like masculinity. That's a different question. It just means that they don't see themselves as masculine. And if we add the twos in here, we get 82% of women who disagree that they consider themselves masculine. Women can and do answer across the whole spectrum, as you can see, but the overwhelming preference among women is not to. Ready for the answers men gave? You can probably guess where this is going. That's right. The largest number, technically a plurality, not a majority, of 41% of men agree strongly that they are very masculine. You can follow the dark blue bars from right to left to see 30%, 20%, 5%, 4% as you go to the disagree side. If we add up the two responses from the agreement side of the scale, the 4 and the 5, we see that 71% of men agree that they are masculine. Now, if you are one of those people who believes that masculinity is bad, then these numbers are disheartening indeed. I mean, 41% of men, nearly half, are very masculine, or at least they think they are. We have a lot of work to do to fix those men so they can recover from their, toxic ways. It was actually in response to that mode of thinking that I chose to pursue this line of questioning in my survey in the first place. And as you'll learn, I have, for my 5 decades on this planet, largely believed that masculinity was a potential source of harm. And when I first saw these results, I got nervous. I mean, based just on this chart, we have a lot of he-men out there that we need to watch out for and protect against. But then I did the correct thing. I analyzed these men to see what makes them different from other men who do not consider themselves 5 out of 5 masculine. And, well, what I found, it surprised me. As I wrote in a piece called The Pitfalls and Power of Masculinity in October of last year, these men, these very masculine men, turn out to be amazing. In fact, if anything, we want more men to feel this masculine. Now, I'm not going to quote everything from that article. You can follow the links below to learn more. But using my survey data, I showed that in fact, as we might expect, masculine men are more likely to be aggressive, to take charge, even to admit that they take advantage of others. Sure. But paired with that, these men, in contrast with other men, they are happier, more satisfied with their lives. They have more stable incomes and marriages. They are more likely to be in long-term emotional relationships. And they are more likely to agree with sentimental statements like, love is worth working hard to find. Not what you thought, huh? In short, it's not about taking the good with the bad when it comes to very masculine men. It's about the overwhelming good, the power of masculine men for good to be a benefit to their families, to their communities, and to society in general. Which leads me to my 2002 New Year's resolution. Ready? I resolve to be more masculine in 2022. Now, I asked you to say your answer to the question out loud, and so it's only fair that I do the same. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is agree, how much do I agree with the statement, I consider myself very masculine? I am a solid 4. Now, I'm a solid 4 for 2 reasons. I apologize in advance about this, but this New Year's resolution is basically going to lead me to divulge a lot about myself, so we might as well start out right in the very front. The reason I am a solid 4, the first reason, is just that I'm not very manly. I'm not very strong. I've never enjoyed engaging in the kind of male, rough and tumble, aggressive play, the kinds of things that men do to size each other up. I don't really enjoy sports generally, team sports least of all. Way more comfortable with Broadway than the Super Bowl. It's just the way I am. Now, a subtler point is that I don't have what I'll call a will to dominate. I have no interest in trying to compel people to do things that maybe they don't want to do. And I'd be a terrible salesperson for just that reason. We'll get into the will to dominate later, how it's measured and what it says. But for now, just know that if you were to meet me, you might be one of the many people who would swiftly conclude that I am, as we used to say in the 90s, very comfortable with my feminine side. Which gets me to my second reason that I am a solid 4. I have been proud that I'm not a stereotypical male. That stereotypical male that has been the target of hundreds of hit pieces in popular culture for as long as I have been aware of such a thing. From Homer Simpson to Gaston from Disney's Beauty and the Beast. In fact, I have one of the first books that I was aware of that was specifically written to mock traditional masculinity. It's called Real Men Don't Eat Quiche, and it was published first when I was 13 years old. The writer, Bruce Fierstein, who, by the way, had written and would go on to write James Bond movies. So he's a guy who knows a thing or two about stereotypical masculinity. He was featured on the talk shows. The book sold millions of copies and was translated into many languages. It's basically a send-up of traditionally male attributes and was praised up and down in the media in its day. I managed to find a copy in an online used bookstore. And I have to admit, after all these years of thinking about it, finally getting a chance to read it was, well, a bit disappointing. Not because it's not funny. It is, in fact. But that's all it is. It's just a series of what we would call blog posts today, making fun of masculinity with some illustrations and some top lists of things that men do or don't do to be real men. But there was no discussion, no analysis, no attempt at nuance. Seeing the book now, I understand that was not the writer's intent. But boy, the global discussion on masculinity that it prompted sure seemed serious at the time and worthy of some analysis. Now, I was 13. I was in 8th grade gym class 3 to 5 days a week. We had to shower communally. There's a whole episode that we can and probably should do on that later, but basically all the boys I grew up with had to watch each other pubesce, taking showers together from the 7th grade on. Nerdy, skinny, unathletic kids like me, well, we didn't like that at all. The manly jock kids, who frankly couldn't spot a quadratic equation to save their lives, they were totally at home in that environment. I mean, these guys just walked around naked and they were pubescing faster than the rest of us. Let's just put it that way. They loved to whip the wimpy kids with their wet towels, and the coach who loved to play dodgeball and bean the skinny kids who hung around the back of these torture sessions because in his mind, that was not a manly way to approach dodgeball, that venerable sport of the ages. Oh, and the same coach, by the way, who would later go to jail for sneaking into the girls' locker room from time to time. Yeah, those were just some of the models of masculinity I was seeing around me in my community. Now, to be fair, these were a small number of the men in my environment, which I wish I had paid more attention to at the time. My own father was and is nothing like that. He was and is awesome. Most of my friends' dads were similar, with a few notable exceptions. These were all just guys trying to feed their families, to do the right thing. Sure, when some of them ended up coaching in our town football league, they would turn into the stereotype. But most of the time, these were and remain good men. But I confess that between the few bad examples I knew personally and the media hype surrounding hypermasculine men, if you had asked me then in the mid-'80s whether I considered myself very masculine, I might have actually answered a 3. A 3 rather than a 4, both because I was skinny and weak and because I thought masculinity was, well, bad stuff. I was wrong. And only now do I have the data to prove it. Sheltering myself in the safe cove of 4 has potentially robbed me of being all the things I could have been. And it's not just that it robbed me of that, it robbed my family, my community, my nation of the things that very masculine men do for their communities. It's time for me to turn over a new leaf. It's time for me to try to be a 5 out of 5. And that's my New Year's resolution. That's the journey I'm going to go on. And it means I'm going to reveal more data about what makes very masculine men so amazing. And it means coming to terms with the many ways I need to stretch myself to be more like them. Now, along the way, I promise you will be surprised. I know this because my data contains astounding secrets, well-kept secrets, about what it is to be a very masculine man. Things that are counterintuitive, things that flatly contradict the stereotypes that you and I have built up over many years. It's time we face those, confront those stereotypes, and accept that the non-masculine straitjacket that we try to put on men is harming them more than helping, and depriving us all of the good that they can do. Starting with myself. That's my New Year's resolution, and I call it, tackily enough, the year of living manly. I'll do as many of these videos as I can throughout the year because I'm a man and because I want to be a masculine man. I have a regular job that helps provide for our family, so I don't have lots of time to do this. We'll be lucky if I get something up each week, however short. Some will just be discussions of more data that I have, more graphs, sorry in advance. Some will be me sharing what it's like to dabble in manly things that I wouldn't normally do. I have a friend who has offered to take me hunting. I'll be running an ultra marathon, and I'll explore the concept of risk in general. Now, it's a big thing for masculine men and generally something that I hold back on. Throughout this process, please feel free to engage, share with your friends, begin some conversations with them. I recommend starting with the question that I asked at the outset, see what they say, see what conversation that can create. And of course, come at me with comments, questions, suggestions. If you have things about what it means to be a masculine man that you want to know better, maybe I have that data and I can answer some of those questions. But overall, here I am, standing in a wet field in a foggy Boston rain on New Year's Day 2022, sharing with you the beginning of my New Year's resolution, the year of living manly.